Paul, welcome to your gaff.
Hi there. Welcome to my house.
Well, we came here just to meet your dog.
Aye.
We've
Everybody
met
comes to meet the dog. I know how it goes.
We've met Ginger, and I suppose we might as well talk to you.
I'm always second billing. It's the wee ginger dog. And Paul Kavanagh.
And Paul Kavanagh. So who is Paul Kavanagh?
The wee ginger dog's owner. The person who looks after the wee ginger dog.
How did he get started in politics?
Well, I didn't
What got you bit?
really. It's kind of like everything else in life. It's just something I fell into by accident. You know, it's nothing. I didn't have like a career plan or anything. It was. I started off blogging about Scottish politics when I was still living in Spain, and I was looking after my partner who was showing the early symptoms of dementia at the time. So I'd given up work to look after him, and I used to comment on various politics forums online in Scotland, and one of them was the Blether with Brian blog. And I used to comment on there regularly, and there's a couple of people I got to know because they also commented on other websites, so we exchanged email addresses and kept in touch, and one of them was G.A. Ponsonby. And we used to comment on the Blether with Brian blog on the BBC when the BBC Scotland actually allowed, you know, ordinary punters to have a view on Scottish politics, which they don't anymore for some strange reason. I wonder why.
Never figured that one out.
No. And anyway, so we all just commented on that, and then there was the whole Stephen Purcell affair. When Stephen Purcell left Glasgow Council, and there was all these sorts of allegations of drug abuse and some very dodgy goings on in the council. And the line the BBC was taking was we were all invited to sympathise with poor Stephen and his struggle with mental health problems. And a lot of people got really annoyed about it because if he had been an SNP council leader who'd left under similar circumstances, the BBC would have gone to town on it. They would have fully investigated all the stories that were flying around. I mean, I've no knowledge one way or the other about the truth or otherwise about these allegations that were circulating, but there was some very lurid stories were circulating at the time, allegations of inappropriate dealings and inappropriate behaviour, and like I says, I've no idea about the truth or otherwise of them, but the point is the BBC should have been investigating this, and they didn't. The line they were taking was Stephen Purcell and his problems with mental health issues when the guy had a raging cocaine habit, you know, which was well documented. And we felt very strongly, and I'm not an SNP member, I've never been an SNP member, but we felt very strongly that if he'd been an SNP council leader, the BBC would really have gone overboard, and we would probably still be hearing to this very day about how this was a reason why Scotland couldn't possibly be trusted to become an independent country. As it was, the impression the BBC was given was that they were looking after one of their own, because Stephen Purcell, who to his credit has come out in favour of independence, he used to have lunch meetings with BBC management, and it was all very cliquey and very cosy, and that was the impression that was being given, that, you know, they were looking after one of their own. And on the Blether with Brian blog, whenever anybody tried to raise attention to any of these broader issues, it didn't matter how carefully you phrased it to make sure that it wasn't in any way defamatory. The BBC immediately censored the comment. They were not going to let you talk about this at all. And that got G.A. Ponsonby got so annoyed about it that he decided that he was going to take on the entire weight of the Scottish Unionist media all by himself.
Does George get annoyed about things?
Ever so slightly, yes. He's definitely got a bee in his bonnet about the BBC.
I have no doubt.
Ever so slightly. And that was a bit of a bone of contention when we were doing Newsnet. It was like, just got to change the fucking record, George, please. You know, just like, let's talk about something else, not just the BBC. You know, there's other things to talk about. But anyway, so he started Newsnet, and originally it was just an email list, and you had to subscribe to it. And I was, you know, I wrote some early articles for it when it was still a subscription-only email list. And I said to him one day, I mean, I'd write about Spanish politics and Catalan politics, and then if it ever happened to interest me, you know. And I says to him one day, look, you've got some really good stuff on this, but a lot of the spelling and the punctuation's atrocious, you know. And I used to edit a magazine in Spain, and these things matter, because if your spelling and your punctuation's bad, people look at that and that's all they see. And you might think, well, the important thing's the factual information, but what people say to themselves, if you can't be bothered to check your spelling and your punctuation, you can't be bothered to check your facts either. And it really affects your credibility. So, you know, presentation's important. So I says, you really need a sub-editor. And I says, the famous last words, I'll do it until you find somebody. You know, and that's how I got sucked in. And it was a couple of months after that, shortly after that, Newsnet got a donation from a Scottish guy in Australia that allowed us to set up a proper site. And we were totally blown away by the response to it, because none of us expected it. We really didn't expect the amount of traffic that it was generating on the site. The site collapsed a couple of times, actually, just couldn't cope with the amount of hits it was getting.
And how far ahead? 2014.
This was in 2010, 2011. It was before the 2011 election. It was January 2011, I think. Early 2011 was when the site started, and there was a huge amount of interest, and it really demonstrated there was an enormous appetite in Scotland for news and opinion from a pro-independence perspective.
So this was actually well ahead of the entire curve.
This was before the Scottish election in 2011, when everybody expected that Labour was going to become the largest party. You know, that was when the whole famous subway incident with Ian Gray. And that was when I wrote the very first Wee Ginger Doug articles, was during that election campaign. Just because it was a bit po-faced, and I thought we need a bit of piss-taking. Really. So I wrote these Wee Ginger Doug articles, I called them.
And had you ever intended it to be anonymous?
No, not really. It's not that it was anonymous, it's just that we took a decision. We had a bad experience with Newsnet at the early days, when someone involved with it was very obviously using Newsnet as a platform for their own ambitions, you know, their own political ambitions, their own career ambitions. And they were not being, they weren't a team player, shall we say.
You're not going to mention names?
No, I'm not going to mention names. Anyway, we had a wee sort of cootie website and expelled them. You know, we changed the passwords so that you couldn't get into the site anymore. But we took a conscious decision that Newsnet wasn't going to be about people's it wasn't going to be about egos. It was about the information, and it was about independence, and it was about, you know, trying to get the stories out there. So it's not about us trying to mark out territory for our career, or it wasn't about us, and it wasn't about our egos. And that was why we took a conscious decision not to be anonymous, but not to make it all about me.
Of course.
Kind of a thing.
And going before that, I mean, the making of Paul Kavanagh, I know about a story about a pot getting chucked into Loch Lomond, a frying pan belonging to your man. So there was activism there when
Not
you were
really.
in your 20s.
It was just when I kind of, it was just in a kind of a general. I wasn't a political activist in any shape or form, but occasionally I would do things because I was interested in various campaigns. Obviously, I didn't. You know, I've been on lots of. I used to go on CND marches back in the 1980s because we all thought the world was going to end. You know, and I still think the world was going to end. You know, with Donald Trump was to inspire confidence, but things like that. I mean, I wasn't a great political activist, really, but I would participate in things. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't an activist. I was sort of a follower.
So, this stuff you did in terms of LGBTQ activism, for lack of a better term, how much of that sort of political, social activity prepared you for what you're doing now? And what sort of lessons have you brought from that?
Well, no, I mean, like I says, again, I was a follower, not a leader in any shape or form. You know, I would go to marches and demonstrations and this kind of thing. My partner, Andy, my late partner, he was very much involved in an HIV and AIDS awareness charity. And I would go along with meetings to things like that. And yeah, so I did, in a way it kind of taught me that you don't get civil liberties, you don't get rights by being nice and polite. You get it by annoying people, basically, and by being persistent and determined and not going away. You know, you don't. It was an elderly gay guy told me, you know, way back. This was early 90s, I think, yeah, late 80s. That you don't get gay rights by being Miss Nice. You know, you get it by being annoying. Mm-hmm. You know, and saying, no, I'm here and I'm not going away and I'm going to continue to be a thorn in your side until you give me equality. I'm not going to ask nicely for it, I'm going to demand it. And I think those are the kind of lessons that we should transpose into the independence movement. We're not going to get it by being nice and polite. We have to be persistent, we have to demand it, we have to take it. One of the most valuable lessons I was ever taught was a much older gay guy who had been involved in the campaign for lesbian and gay equality since like the 1950s when it was highly illegal. And he's probably passed away now. And he said that this is a campaign for equality. And if you believe that you're equal, I mean, and this was in the days of, you know, Section 28 and, you know, the newspapers were full of horrible stories about, you know, these evil perverts who want to destroy the family and all this kind of carry on. A friend of mine lost his job because he organised parties for gay men, you know, private parties. And he was very careful to ensure that no one who came was under the age of 21, because the age of consent was 21 at the time, that nothing happened. You know, there was no sex. These were not orgies. You know, it was very douce wee gatherings so that people could meet one another. And this was exposed by the Express.
Lovely.
And it was plastered all over about these, you know, pervert sex parties. And he lost his job, he lost his house, you know, and that's the kind of atmosphere there was at the time. Anyway, and this elderly guy says to me that, you know, this is a campaign for equality. And if you genuinely believe that you're anybody's equal, act as though you are. And by acting equal, you become equal. And I think for the independence movement, the lesson is if we believe in Scottish independence, then we need to think independently. You know, we to act independently. There's no point, I think, in us sitting passively and waiting for someone to give us permission to campaign for Scottish independence. Mm-hmm. We should just do it. You know, we should just go ahead and do it. Because if we sit passively waiting for permission to campaign for independence, we'll never really be independent. We're just substituting one set of bosses for another set of bosses. We'll end up with all the same problems and all the same issues and all the same inequalities and injustices that we've got at the moment, just wrapped up in a tartan bow. And then what's the point in independence? You know, I mean, I want an independent Scotland where people are engaged, because I've always thought, I was born and brought up in the East End of Glasgow in North Lanarkshire, and there's just so much apathy and despair in this part of the world. People think it doesn't matter who you vote for, it doesn't matter what you say, nothing ever changes, nothing ever happens. And I think that's what we need to overcome. You know, we need people to be engaged in changing their own lives, because that's the only way change will ever come about.